something that we think about with technology. I think we tend to think about solutions, right? Like we could be talking about a solar powered pump system in a community and how
Yeah.
that's actually bringing clean water. We actually use technology to build empathy because one of the challenges with operating in a space where people are living such different experiences is figuring out how to build connection between you, who might be living over here and living one very distinct reality, and how you build empathy with communities that look very different from your own
Mhm.
and have very different lives.
What is up, Impact Heroes? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rick Ornelas. Thank you for spending some time with us today because we know time's a valuable resource and we're going to make it worth your while. I appreciate each and every one of you, not just for listening, but for who you are. I know you're sparking change to make the world a better place every day, and I am humbled and grateful for your efforts. It takes all of us doing our part to spread positive change. And that's what this show is all about. Motivating you with stories of struggle, courage, and hope to empower you to make a difference in your life and the lives of others.
In case you missed it,
Driven by our emotions, which are driven subconsciously by what are the thoughts that we're thinking. Sometimes the knowing of I don't feel like doing this, but I still can follow through with this. I am strong enough. I'm able to do this. So it's really having people start creating that awareness of their emotions and those thoughts that are creating the emotions. So that even though when things they don't feel like doing it and we're not motivated and we don't have that drive there, we still are strong enough and we build that resilience and that self-confidence.
available everywhere you listen to your podcasts.
Welcome back, Impact Heroes. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to our latest iSpark Change social impact hero, and she is a special, interesting one indeed. Our guest today believes in leveraging data and technology for better decisions, better products, and better delivery. That's a lot of better. Her organization believes that when you give, they will help make it count. She's focused on building innovative and useful digital experiences, and I'm deeply motivated by her mission. And we'll definitely dig into that. One of her gifts is the ability to translate a vision into strategy and then connect that strategy to execution. Now, I know that's something you cannot find every day with all the people I've worked with. She's an expert in communication and team leadership and knows how to have the crucial conversations with anyone from junior team members to an investor or even a board member. She's a master at stimulating high levels of productivity through a service-oriented, participative approach and leading teams. This self-starter is passionate, intelligent, and captivating. So please welcome the authentic, driven, empowering, and amazing Christa Stelzmuller. Christa, welcome to the iSpark Change podcast.
Thank you. That was such a nice introduction. I really
Oh,
appreciate that.
oh, you're very welcome. Well, it's your story. I just shared it with everybody. So my pleasure to share it with our audience. So I'm excited to dive into our conversation because you and I have some, definite things in common from, what I was reading in the bio, about communication and about being able to, take that vision and turn it into strategy and execution, everything. Because like I said, those are things that a lot of people struggle with. So we have a lot of listeners that are, entrepreneurs, executives, people that are interested in personal development and leadership. So we will definitely dive in there. Before we get there, we have to start with the question that we always start our show with, because we have you on the show because we consider you what we call a social impact hero, someone who, by our definition, is making the world a better place, impacting others in a positive way, and helping to make others better. So we consider you a social impact hero. The question I have for you is, do you consider yourself a hero?
I mean, I think the answer is no. I don't consider myself a hero. We have actually sort of a saying at Charity Water that everybody else is the hero and
Ah,
we're not the hero. And whether it's our local implementation partners or the communities that we're trying to serve, there's a lot of heroes out there in the world. And we're just trying to facilitate change and positive impact.
yeah, well, that's a humble approach. You're right, a humble viewpoint to what I'm saying. by my definition, I would say that yes, they are all heroes. You are correct, and then you are too, right? And you and all your colleagues are as well. But just by virtue of um, because with our definition, the acronym that we follow is that everyone has the ability to do heroic work on a daily basis just by positively impacting others. So just, by that rationale, then you would definitely qualify. So we'll see if we can get you convinced by the end of the show. So I am curious to dive in. It's one thing that always fascinates me and our audience is, how someone got to the point, at which we're speaking to them, right? Because that's part of our journey. We're all on that hero's journey, so to speak. And how we got to do the heroic work that we're doing today is, most of the time it's not something that, the person has been doing all their life, right? It's usually
Right.
there's some journey there. So I know you've worked for a lot of different organizations and everything. I'd like you to share just specifically about, how that desire to, positively impact people, some things that I referenced in your bio, how that, kind of transpired and how you got to where you are here now with Charity Water.
Yeah. Well, when I actually first left college, I had this idea, I think many of us do, right, when we're leaving college, that we want to go out and make an impact in some capacity in the world, make a positive impact. And I pursued an internship. I was working at a nonprofit, but I was working for free. And I actually don't come from a family of means. And so I was not in a position to be able to do that indefinitely. And I had to give that up and come home and get a job that paid me, that was working in the for profit world. And I remember always feeling a little bit like, oh, I feel like I left something behind when I actually did that. But you don't really leave it behind everywhere I've worked since then. I was actually very lucky to jump into the world of technology at that point in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And there were so many people who helped me make that transition that were so instrumental. They just set a really good model for what it means. Like you can make an impact in a big scale by what you do every single day, or you can just try to impact one person. And I had some incredible mentors who helped kick off my career from a technology perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
it made such a big impact on me. And from there, I like the part where I always like to make an impact generally sticks with me. Like from job to job as I moved, I was always trying to do something that would make a positive change in one context or another, whether it was, working on content moderation or whether it's working on identifying malicious actors in some kind of data somewhere, or working for a startup that had a social impact mission of a specific kind. And then as I went through my career, I kept trying to get closer and closer back to where I had started.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally, when I was leaving my last role, said, there has to be nonprofits out there that are looking for people with my kind of technical skills. And so I was finally able to bring it full circle back again to
Yeah.
where I started and really find a nonprofit whose values were values that were well aligned with my own, and who are also looking for someone who was working in the space, the technology space in particular, which is where I spend my time, and how we can use technology to actually help facilitate impact in places that it may not always feel like it's the most obvious place to apply
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I was really excited to be able to sort of come full circle again, back from where I started, and use all of the lessons I'd learned and all the people and opportunities I'd had to try to make an impact along the way and land where I'm at right now.
And thank you for sharing. It sounds like, Krista, that there was, like you said, there was always that kind of desire or that pull to go back to that world. Was that something that do you think was driven by that first role out of school, or is that something that you learned at a younger age? Like it was something that, in your upbringing to want to help others or serve others, or where does that, that desire come from?
Yeah, I think I don't know where it truly comes from. I think some of it comes from inside of us, right? But I also think some of it was my upbringing as well. And we had a few challenges. I had a little sister who was quite ill when I was young. And so always like being there and trying to figure out how you can help and how you can maybe make my mom's day a little bit easier or do anything along those lines. It was just something I think that you learn to do at a young age. But I think there's also just things inside of us that motivate us sometimes. And I'm self-admittedly a very motivated person to try to make a difference in all kinds of ways. And I sometimes overcommit myself in that capacity. But whether it's I also work in my community as well. And whether it's like planning a new mural in our community or whether it's working every day on what I'm doing, I feel like I just have a tendency to want to operate in
Yeah.
this mode.
To want to do something, right?
Right,
Want
right.
to
I
help.
guess I just feels very anxious, and I think some of to anxious to do something, right? And I think some of that comes from how I was raised, and some of it I think is just maybe part of my personality.
Yeah, it's the whole like nature versus nurture kind of conversation that, we could have 100 psychologists and they give us 100 different answers. But I think the important part for, purposes of our conversation, Krista, is that all of it has um, helped to mold you into the person that you are, right? All of the experiences, even one from last week, right? Not from, years ago when you were in your upbringing, but even something from, very recent, is that those all play a part. And the important part in our context is that, it still makes a difference, right? It still makes a
Right.
difference when you seek to help others, whether it's the mural or, charity water work or what have you. So share more about, because I know until, I did some research for the interview that I wasn't really familiar with how charity water works. So share with our audience, because I know they would love to know how they would love to learn how, how it all works, and, how you guys do the work that you do.
Oh, sure. So, Charity Water is a nonprofit. We have a very specific model that we operate, though, as a nonprofit, which we call our 100% model. And if we talk about trying to make an impact, I think it's one of those things that is super important to the brand overall because we want to make sure that everyone can make maximum impact. And so, the 100% model really ensures that as a donor, if you decide to donate to Charity Water, we will guarantee that 100% of your money will go directly to a water project. It will not go to fund what often gets called in the industry overhead, but I feel like overhead's not the best word in the world for it. And then we operate with a model where we have a separate group of donors, a separate group of private donors who are explicitly focused on funding the overhead and the operations of the organization. And so, what that allows us to do is work with implementation partners in the countries and all the various countries that we work in, mostly in Africa and in South Asia. And we are deploying all of the funds there that are being donated to us. And so that it's interesting because I will sometimes survey our donor base and survey folks generally and how they feel about the 100% model. And I know it really speaks to people because when people are giving, they're coming from a place of giving and they may not also have a ton of means to be able to give. And so it means a lot to be able to say, my $10 is going to go as far as it can possibly go because 100% of it is going to go out to a water project. And so you'll know that when we are working with our implementation partners, we're just making sure that 100% of that money is landing on the construction of a water point that will now hopefully transform the lives of a community that doesn't have clean water today. It's something that's super hard to think about. The idea, like many of us, I think, have a hard time relating to not being able to go to our kitchen tap and just turn it on and get clean water out.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't exist in many of these communities. And so we're often bringing the first clean water source to a community, and this transforms children's lives and it transforms women's lives in particular, because they're no longer walking miles every single day hauling and fetching water that then they are not even happy to give their children, because they know that water will likely make their children sick and make them sick. And so it's when you think about your $10 and 100% of that can go toward that effort, and you don't as a donor have to feel diluted, like that impact is going to be diluted. It speaks, I think, to a lot of folks overall, and how we all want to maximize what little we can do for others.
Yeah, and it's I think that's really important in today's world because, with the economics of the day, people are very, I know I looked at some data recently regarding, giving in churches, and it's at it hasn't changed in 50 years. It's actually lower than it was 50 years ago, even though there's more wealth in the country. And so for, and there's plenty of stories of, you know, big execs with huge salaries and, penthouses and jets and all these things. So to know that, that's not the case, right? And, where the money is going. And one thing that was staggering to me when I looked on your website was that I believe it was 703 million, people
That's
still
right.
don't have access to water. I was like, that's almost 10% of the world's population. Like that's a huge number. I was kind of dumbfounded when I saw that it was still, that's so many people.
It's so many people, and you're right, it is about 10% of the world's population right now, and the burden of that is really, I mean, it's shouldered by the entire community, but so much of the burden is shouldered by women in particular, because it's women are walking miles, they're taking hours out of their day, and then if fetching water in ways where it's very time consuming, right? Where bottles, jerry cans have to be filled and hauled back. And women are making trade offs in their minds every single day of like, am I going to wash or am I going to use this water for something else, right? Because
Mhm.
when there's real scarcity, you have to decide what the trade offs are going to be and what's most important to do on any given day with the water that you have. And yeah, it's staggering to think over 700 million people are living, making those choices every single day. And we're really on a mission to bring that number to zero. There's been a lot of progress over the last 20 years. I think when Scott Harrison, our founder, founded Charity Water, there were over 1 billion people in the world who lacked clean access, and Charity Water certainly isn't responsible for all of those individuals, right? There's different groups working on this problem, but we are very proud of the contribution that we have made in reducing this number, and we really believe that this is a problem that can be solved in our lifetimes. This is not one of those problems that feels so intractable that it feels overwhelming to solve. Like we very much know that this is a solvable problem, and it's literally money and effort that help
Yeah, yeah,
solve this
and time.
problem. Yeah,
Yeah,
and time,
and time,
exactly.
and time. So on that note, and that's obviously you're making a difference. Obviously, it is a collective effort, and it can't be done by one organization. And that's our goal here, is to help amplify the message of individuals like yourself and like Charity Water, so more people become aware, right? So more people become aware, and they where they might not have known who you are or what you do or have access to the information that you're sharing. So you mentioned bringing technology, to the places that you've worked with. So obviously, when you think about, like you said, it's hard for us in a first world country to think about, turning the tap and not having water, right? And even, when we have, where I live here in the Gulf Coast, if it's, hurricane or something where, the water goes off for, a day or a few hours, it's like, oh my gosh, it's such a big deal. So I
Right.
couldn't even imagine, having to, walk miles and hours and everything. So the question here, Krista, is how have you been able to, or, in your work at Charity Water, or, Charity Water, been able to utilize technology to tackle that problem more effectively, more efficiently, to cut down that timeline of getting that number down to zero?
Yeah. Well, I'll actually start on the fundraising side because even though it may not sound obvious, I think the first thing to really think about is the fact that on the fundraising side, we can use technology to build empathy. And that's not always something that I think we think about with technology. Is technology is very I think we tend to think about solutions, right? Like we could be talking about a solar powered pump system in a community and how
Yeah,
that's actually bringing clean water. But that
that's what
that
came to
is
my mind. Stuff like
yeah,
that.
exactly. But I love talking about how we actually use technology to build empathy because one of the challenges with operating in a space where people are living such different experiences is using figuring out how to build connection between you who might be living over here and living one very distinct reality and how you build empathy with communities that look very different from your own
Mhm,
and have very different lives. And so one of the things we want to do is figure out how to build that empathy and how we can actually use technology to build that empathy. And so we do that a number of ways. We do it through our storytelling. And so we have technology employed. We have VR that we use in an effort to bring stories that are directly from communities to people and
wow.
allow them to experience those stories and what it we will tell stories like what the story of a community before the community had water and usually through the life of a community member. And so there's one in particular I'm thinking of, Grace, and we'll tell Grace's story. And you can see it through VR and experience like being what it feels like to be in her village, and
Hmm.
then experience all the joy that happens when the drill finally arrives and the water is
Hmm.
flowing. And so that's one way we can use technology to make an impact is by bringing people closer to each other through technology in really positive ways around how we tell the stories. We also we use technology pretty extensively to try to make sure that we're being transparent so that donors know about the exact impact. And so when you make a donation, the idea is that it doesn't just go into a black box somewhere. The hope is that we'll eventually be able to come back and tell you this community in Uganda is where we matched your dollars to, and here is the project, and here are the people that live in this, so that you can actually use the tech. We can use all of our systems that we build to make sure that we can report that back in a really transparent way, all in an effort to help us build ongoing empathy between folks who have the means to be able to help and the folks in the communities who really need the clean water. And then on the flip side, the technology is also used on the solution side, right? And we use it in a number of ways. I think we're pretty solution agnostic when it comes to what kind of water system we'll build. We really want the community to lead in terms of what makes the most sense, right? Like
Yeah.
a pipe system may make the most sense for one community, but a hand pump well may make the most sense for another community. So sometimes we're talking about very low tech solutions overall, and sometimes we're talking about something a little bit more sophisticated. But where technology really, again, comes in, and I'm going to bring it back to the empathy side of things, is really measuring the impact. And one of the things Charity Water has been deeply involved with has been developing a new set of metrics that we can report out on what clean water actually means to a community. So we
Wow.
can, again, we can be very sort of technical about this and say, what is the flow rate and how many gallons per minute are
Yeah.
flowing and things of that nature. Like we can point technology at answering those questions, or we can point technology and effort at answering the questions of what has happened to the mental health of this community since
Yeah.
clean water has been deployed here, and what does that mean, and how has economic opportunity unlocked for that community, and what has changed over time, and really tracking over time what that change can look like once clean water is no longer the obstacle to something, to a community being able to grow and flourish. And so I think we're very biased toward using technology in those ways rather than finding sort of the coolest, fanciest, like, water pump that we
Yeah.
can build.
Yeah. And which is, I love everything that you shared, Krista, because it's not what I expected at all, right? I expected you to talk about, the solar, the coolest pump, whatever. And what you're describing seems way more impactful, to the phrase that came to mind was to bridge that gap, because to see to see life through the eyes of another, in my opinion, is one of the most challenging things that we can do as a human being, especially when it's completely foreign to us, right? Like a totally different
Right,
culture. And it is one of the most, and when I've experienced it, it is one of the most rewarding and deeply intimate ways that you can connect with someone else. So, and I just small examples, like even when I'm able to, my wife and I, we've been together, married 28 and a half years, together 31. And one of my favorite things, after all these years, is when I see her through the eyes of someone else, because she's a group fitness instructor, and she teaches, seniors and all different people, and they all love her so much. And when I get to experience how they see her, it's such a gift for me, because it's a way that I know her in every way possible, right? But it's a
right.
way that I don't know her, and so that's where it's so like personal and intimate. And so I'm just visualizing for, your donors to be able to bridge that gap and be able to see, that true impact. And then I love the second part of what you're saying, Krista, about those kind of intangible measurables,
Right.
right? That you're, not KPIs, but just like, oh, hey, this is what it's done, like you said, to the mental health, or to the well-being, or just different things that are difficult to measure. Honestly, they're difficult to measure. They're oftentimes way more valuable, way more important.
Yeah,
So,
because they're what inspire. They're it's what unlocks for a community the ability to make a different kind of progress, right?
mhm,
It's when you're not worried about where your clean water is going to come from, or whether the glass of water that you're drinking is going to give you a some kind of health condition overall, you have time to think about other things, and you have time to imagine different
yeah.
things, and that it does feel intangible, but it has such very real outcomes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Are you familiar with the work of Peter Diamandis?
I don't think I am.
He's the creator of the X Prize, where, and then he's replicated it multiple times. And he wrote the book
Yeah,
Abundance, which is like 2012. And he talks about, clean water, and, making things accessible. And in there, he discusses how, one of the ways that that things become accessible and readily available is through technology, right? Is through technology, how, something becomes abundant, and then it, becomes accessible and easy, and how it can. And but what reminded me of what you're saying is that he further goes on to describe those impacts, to describe how those deeper impacts, that go beyond what you would expect, and those are some of the things that you're describing. Is, okay, now you've gained 5 hours in your day,
right.
what is that 5 hours used for, that had to be used for water. And yeah, and that's something I know even myself in my coaching of others, that I talk about, like just like little hacks on how, ways to, be more productive and, to be more successful in leveraging, time, and to think of it from that standpoint of someone that, they don't know any different. That's just a part of their life. That would be such a gift.
It's so true. You've actually just hit on like the often we hear, and we don't, we're happy with any way that someone wants to use the newfound time, right? But the type of story that we almost often hear from a community is, I now don't, with these extra hours that I have, that I'm not going to get water and bringing water back and doing this multiple times in a day, women will have time to start a personal garden where they now start growing food in that garden, right? And
Mhm.
some of them will now sell it as well, right? And so there's just these pathways and that's another woman may think of doing something very different, right? Like she may now be able to walk with her daughter to school or something along those lines, right?
Mhm.
There's different avenues that open up. And yeah, there's new safety that gets created and less anxiety, and these just make space for so many different things.
Yeah, it's all the ripple effects.
Yeah.
So, we talk about that on this program all the time. It's that ripple effect. There's that one small act that happens. In this case, it's obviously not small in, giving a community water, but it's the single act that, people think about that single act, but what you don't realize are all those ripple effects that go far beyond that initial act. So, one question we have that we ask all our guests here, Krista, is about those spark moments. So, do you have a story that, comes to mind, either, from your work or or even if it's, a spark moment where someone impacted you that, caused you, ripple effect that you didn't realize right away, but, something that exemplifies that initial act and then, it going far beyond.
I mean, I think on a personal level, I feel like the biggest ripple effect I had is if I think all the way back to the first person who decided to mentor me. Mentorship is something that's really important to me overall. And when I think of the first person who decided to mentor me and set the tone for what it would mean to decide to help someone else make progress,
Hmm.
and that I saw that and I got all the benefit of that, and then as soon as I tried it out, I got all the gratification and fulfillment that I knew that that person must have been feeling at that moment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I've seen folks that I have mentored along the way then turn into mentors themselves, and that I feel like that's just a ripple effect that I can easily see what happened there in life, right? Where it just started with one person for me very early on and then turned into lots of different people having the benefit of having a mentor who actually cares about your personal development and helping you move forward in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a fantastic example of a spark moment, Krista, because it's that, pay it forward kind of mentality of, that, and feeling all the gratification, like you said, from doing that work, which, I know that's why I do what I do. And it's amazing to me. One of the things it's always amazing to me is that, that old adage of, it's the one who, gives is the one that, gets all the gifts, or, it's better to give than to receive. I don't understand how more people don't experience that, how more people don't
Right.
realize that, right? That once you do it, you're like, wow, this is like way better than the other way. Like, I mean, it feels it's so much more gratifying. And it's like the secret in life that's not a secret, but it's just, and it's taught in every major religion and everything, that's what you should do. But it seems like in our society, there's the mentality of me first mentality. And so it's, not pervasive, at least not, I don't know, it probably is, but it's just not something that you hear about every day.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we can also be selective as human beings about where we choose, right? Like we make these little choices for ourselves of, oh, I'll help you, maybe, but not you, that kind of thing. And if
Mhm.
you take a more expansive view of it and what you can give, you at least I have found the gratification just amplifies, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't get reduced by like limiting it and doling it out in very small quantities, right? It really
Yeah.
just gets amplified. And
Yeah.
I know I feel an enormous amount of fulfillment when I'm able to contribute in that way.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And, we're very grateful that you decided to come on and, share about Charity Water and the work that you're doing. And how can people learn more about your work and how they can support, Charity Water and, get
I
that
would
number down?
I would love if everyone visited charitywater.org right now and just took a look at our work. We have information up about what we do every single day. And if you just want to visit charitywater.org, it will it will already start you down the path of all the ways that you could potentially contribute and participate in helping solve the water crisis and help reduce that number of 700 million people down to a much smaller number.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And the website has a ton of great information. So, we'll make sure we put that in the show notes for everybody to go
And
and
we have a campaign running right now for end of year. So if you feel so inspired, please,
yeah,
by all means.
yeah, increase that number, hit that
Yeah,
50,000, right? Hit
yeah,
that 50,000 in that campaign. Yeah. So, well, we will include that for sure and pass that on.
thanks.
So, one final question here, Krista, before we wrap up, because our goal at iSpark Change is to also have a big impact. It's to positively impact 1 billion people within 5 years of launching our upcoming social impact social media platform, where we can collectively, support and share the stories of, organizations like Charity Water, so more people become aware. So we know we can't do it alone. We know we need the help of impactful leaders like yourself to help show others the way, because a lot of people feel, as I once did, that they're too small to make a difference. So we value your thoughts and opinions as a social impact hero. So I want you to peer into the future, peer into our crystal ball here, and tell me, what can the world become if everyone starts believing that they can impact our future in a positive way?
Oh, well, I hate to give such a simplistic answer, but hopeful, happy, and optimistic. If everyone just imagine if we all felt so much more positive and happy every single day instead of focusing on the negative. And I feel like that's a path toward making that happen.
Yeah, and what a beautiful path that would be. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for answering that. And thank you for taking time to share your heart and wisdom with our audience. You came in and you over delivered as I expected that you would, and your desire to be impactful is evident. And Krista, you're filled with passion, determination, and you lead with a heart of service and gratitude, which tells me you're going to continue to have success at Charity Water and in all facets of life. And this is only the beginning of your time as a social impact hero.
Thank you.
All right, Impact Heroes, it's our stories that connect us all, and we love hearing Krista's today. Christa Stelzmuller, you're not only an inspiring, amazing human being, you truly are an iSpark Change social impact hero. We'll see you all next time.
Do you want Rick to speak at your event? Here is what others have to say.
Did not know his story, and it was so inspirational, and his presence on stage, his authenticity was just incredible.
Performance made me feel some type of way. My name is Craig Siegel.
If you're looking for a speaker for your next event, hire Rick. I promise you this, you will not be disappointed.
Visit rickcornelis.com to book him today.
Remember, Impact Heroes, every positive action can be a spark moment that has a ripple effect that spreads far beyond the initial act. So go out there and spark change. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, then please smash that 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. We value your comments and we want to hear from you in the community. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and we'll see you next week on the iSpark Change podcast.